The transport ship from Earth floated silently toward the massive dome in space. It was called the Grand Assembly Hall, the heart of the Galactic Union. From a distance, the dome looked like a silver bubble floating among the stars. Lights from hundreds of ships surrounded it. Each ship carried leaders from different planets. All had come to discuss the future of peace and defense in the galaxy. Captain Miracle stood by the wide glass window inside the ship. Her hands were folded behind her back. She watched the assembly hall grow larger as they approached. She had seen pictures before, but seeing it with her own eyes was something else. It was both beautiful and intimidating. Mira turned to her team. There were 7 of them, diplomats, security officers, and tech experts. They were all dressed in simple black uniforms with Earth's blue emblem on their shoulders. Each one of them wore a small silver badge on their neck. This badge was more than decoration. It was the Courteous mode device. The small badge sent signals to their brains, helping them stay calm and polite. It kept their emotions under control during official meetings. The Galactic Union had praised Earth for this invention. They believed humans were the most respectful species in the Union. But Mira knew the truth. Without this device, humans could be emotional, loud, and unpredictable. The badge hid their true nature. The ship landed gently on the docking platform. The door hissed open. A group of alien guards stood waiting. They were tall creatures with smooth red skin and bright silver eyes. They carried long staffs with glowing tips. Mira nodded to her team. Together, they stepped out of the ship and followed the guards. As they walked through the wide corridors, Myra's heart beat faster. This was only Earth's second appearance in front of the full council. Many still doubted if humans could be trusted. Mira had worked hard to prepare for this day. She knew every rule, every face, every word she would have to say. Failure was not an option. Finally, they entered the assembly hall. It was bigger than any stadium on Earth. The ceiling showed the stars above, as if the roof was made of clear glass. The seats were arranged in circles, each one holding leaders from different worlds. Some were tall and thin. Some were short and covered in fur. Some floated above their seats without legs. All eyes turned toward the humans as they entered. At the center of the hall stood Senator Vornak of the Drashk Empire. His dark green scales shimmered under the lights. He was large, with sharp claws and yellow eyes that never blinked. Vornak had a strong voice that echoed through the hall without any device. He was known for crushing his enemies with words, not weapons. "Welcome, humans," Vornak said with a cold smile. "We are pleased you could join us again." Mira felt the weight of his words. She knew what he really meant. He was reminding everyone that humans were still new, still on trial. She stepped forward and bowed her head slightly. "Thank you, Senator Vornak," she replied with a calm and steady voice. "Earth is honored to be part of this council. We are here to work for peace and unity, as always." Vornak's smile did not fade. His eyes watched her closely, as if he were waiting for something. The leader of the council, a pale blue creature with 3 eyes named Speaker Harn, raised one long hand. The hall fell silent. "Let us begin," Speaker Harn said softly, but the words carried through the entire hall. Mira and her team took their seats. She could feel her Courteous mode badge humming quietly on her skin. It kept her breathing steady, her voice smooth. She knew today would test everything she had prepared for, but she was ready, or so she thought. The council's meeting began with the usual formalities. Speaker Harn welcomed each planet's leaders, calling their names one by one. When it was Earth's turn, Mira stood again and bowed politely. She spoke the words she had practiced 100 times. "Earth stands with the Union. We seek peace, fairness, and cooperation among all worlds." Her voice was calm. Her hand stayed still. The badge on her neck kept her heart from racing. Mira could almost feel it pushing her natural emotions down, keeping her polite and steady. But Senator Vornak was already watching her with those sharp yellow eyes. After the introductions, the real business of the day began. The council had gathered to discuss a new defense law. This law would decide how each planet could protect itself, and when a union could step in. It was a difficult topic. Some planets wanted more freedom to defend themselves. Others feared that too much freedom would lead to war. Earth, as the newest member, had little power. Still, they had a voice. Mira was here to use it. Speaker Harn opened the floor for debate. One by one, leaders began to speak. Some spoke with anger. Others spoke with fear. Mira listened carefully. She knew the moment to speak would come. She had to choose her words with care. Finally, Vornak stood. His voice filled the hall again, deep and cold. "Many here speak boldly," he said, looking around. But one voice remained soft. The voice of Earth. Mira knew he was speaking to her. She stood slowly, her team watching her closely. "Earth chooses its words with care, Senator Vornak," Mira answered. "We respect the right of all planets to defend themselves. But we believe the Union must stand together, not apart." Vornak's smile grew wider. He walked a few steps closer to the center of the hall. "Do you speak for all of Earth, Captain Cole?" he asked. Mira felt the pressure in his words. It was a trick. He wanted her to speak for all humans, not just the government. It was a dangerous path. No one could truly speak for an entire species. "I speak for Earth's place in this council," she replied carefully. Vornak laughed softly. The sound made many in the hall uneasy. "I wonder," he said, turning to the others. "Do we really know who these humans are? We see their polite faces. We hear their careful words. But is this their true nature? Or is it something else?" Myra's heart skipped a beat. She kept her face calm, but she knew what he was suggesting. Vornak took another step forward. "I have heard," he continued, "that humans were devices to control their behavior. Small badges, humming softly, keeping their wild nature hidden from us all." The hall fell silent. All eyes turned to Mira again. She could feel her badge, warm on her skin. Her throat felt dry, but she forced herself to speak. "Our courteous mode technology helps us show respect," she said, steady as ever. "It does not change who we are. It helps us listen. It helps us speak with care." Vornak tilted his head slightly. "Or does it hide something you fear to show?" Mira felt the weight of every eye on her. She knew she had to end this now. She took a slow breath. "Earth has come here to work for peace, not to argue over rumors," she said firmly. "We trust this council to see us as we are, members of this great union." Vornak did not answer. He simply nodded and sat back down. But the look in his eyes told Mira that this was not over. The debate moved on, but the tension stayed thick in the air. Myra's team leaned in, whispering quietly. "He's trying to set us up," one of them said. "He wants us to snap," another added. Mira nodded. She knew it too. Vornak wanted the humans to lose control. He wanted to prove they were hiding something. Mira reminded her team to stay calm. Trust the courteous mode. Trust the plan. Hours passed. The council argued over the defense law. Vornak stayed quiet now, but Mira could feel him watching her. She knew he was waiting for the right moment. She just didn't know when it would come. As the session neared its end, Speaker Harn called for a short break. The members began to leave their seats to stretch and talk in private groups. Mira stayed seated, staring ahead. Something didn't feel right. Her badge hummed softly, steady as always. But her instincts told her this peace wouldn't last. She was right. And soon, the real challenge would begin. The council hall dimmed slightly as the session paused for a break. Most of the delegates rose from their seats. They gathered in small groups, speaking in hushed tones. Some stretched their arms. Others moved toward refreshment tables that floated along the walls. Even Speaker Harn leaned back in his chair, rubbing the sides of his three eyes. Mira stayed seated. She watched the others carefully. Her team stayed close, following her lead. She didn't feel like relaxing. Not yet. She could feel something was coming. Vornak had pushed her earlier, tried to expose the humans. He had gone quiet afterward. Too quiet. Mira knew the silence wasn't the end. It was the setup for something worse. As she scanned the room, she noticed Vornak standing near the edge of the hall. He was speaking with a small, hooded figure from the Tech Guild. Mira couldn't hear what they were saying. She narrowed her eyes, watching their movements. The figure handed Vornak something small, something hidden in his scaled hand. Then the figure walked away quickly, disappearing behind the high seats of the Meru delegation. Mira felt her stomach tighten. She leaned toward Alex, her lead security officer. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Alex nodded. "Yes. Should I alert the council guards?" Mira shook her head. "Not yet. Let's not make a scene." Vornak returned to his seat slowly. He sat back with a calm, confident look on his face. His clawed fingers tapped something under the table. No one seemed to notice. Myra's badge suddenly felt warmer than usual. She reached up and touched it gently. It buzzed strangely, as if the signal was changing. "Captain," Alex whispered again. "Something's wrong with my badge." Mira turned quickly. "What do you mean?" "It just stopped humming," Alex said, touching his neck. "It feels dead." Mira checked hers again. The soft hum she always felt gone. She tapped the side of the badge, trying to restart it. Nothing. She looked around at her team. One by one, they touched their badges, faces confused and uneasy. Something had shut the system down. Suddenly, Mira felt a wave of emotion rise in her chest. Not the usual small ripples she learned to control. This was stronger. She felt her throat tighten, her heart beat faster. For the first time in years, she felt completely unfiltered. Across the table, Vornak smiled again. This time, Mira understood why. Mira stood quickly, her voice louder than she meant it to be. "Team, check your badges." "Now," she ordered. Her voice echoed louder than intended. The nearby groups turned their heads. Mira felt heat rising in her face. She tried to lower her voice, but it didn't work. She felt exposed, like the badge had been holding back a dam that had now burst open. Alex stood too, his voice sharp and annoyed. "They're not working, Captain. They're completely dead." Other members of her team started to speak at once. "This can't be happening. Are we offline? Did someone shut us down?" The voices overlapped, louder and more emotional than any of them had spoken all day. Nearby delegates began to whisper. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked entertained. It was clear the humans were starting to draw attention. Vornak stood slowly, raising one clawed hand toward the council. "Honored members," he said, loud and clear. "It seems the humans have a technical failure." Speaker Harn sat forward, concern in his pale blue face. "Captain Cole, is this true?" Mira opened her mouth, but no careful words came out. Her thoughts felt messy, her heart beating faster than she could manage. She took a breath, trying to calm herself. But the badge was gone. There was nothing holding her together now but her own will. She turned to face the council, forcing her hands to stay at her sides. "Yes," she admitted, her voice rougher than before. "It appears something has shut down our Courteous mode system." Gasps spread through the hall. Even Speaker Harn seemed taken by surprise. Vornak stepped closer. "Then let us see who the humans really are," he said darkly. Mira gritted her teeth. Anger, something she hadn't felt this strongly in years, boiled in her chest. She turned to her team, trying to hold them together. "Stay calm," she whispered. "Don't let them win." But the damage was already spreading. One of her diplomats, Tessa, snapped at a nearby delegate who had made a rude remark. Another, Jonas, threw his hands up in frustration, muttering loudly about the idiotic setup of the hall. The humans' calm faces were cracking, one by one. Mira felt the pressure building. She wanted to scream, to argue, to let out everything she had kept hidden for so long. But she knew she couldn't. Not here. Not now. She looked back at Vornak. His smile grew wider, like a hunter watching trapped prey. Mira clenched her fists at her sides. She knew this was only the beginning of the storm. The hardest part was yet to come. The assembly hall, once a place of calm and order, now felt like it was holding its breath. Every delegate turned their attention to the humans. They watched closely, as if waiting for them to explode. Mira Cole stood stiffly at the edge of her seat. She felt the weight of their eyes pressing down on her. Without Courteous mode, she was on her own. The badge had always helped her control her words, her face, her emotions. Now, her thoughts felt louder. Her heart thumped in her ears. She felt her temper rise with every second. Her team, too, was falling apart. Tessa, still standing, argued with a member of the Valari species, who floated above their seat with folded arms. "You've all been mocking us since the day we arrived." Tessa snapped. You act like we're fools just because we try to be polite. Jonas, leaning against the table, shook his head in frustration. This whole council is a joke, he shouted. Everyone pretends to be civilized, but you're all waiting to stab each other in the back. Mira winced. This was getting worse by the second. She turned to her team and raised her voice. Enough. Sit down, all of you. But her voice cracked. It sounded more like a bark than a command. She could see fear and anger on her team's faces. No one had prepared them for this. Vornak, standing tall, raised his hands in mock concern. Such strong words, he said loudly, looking around the hall. So much for Earth's polite nature. Laughter rippled through the Drash delegation. Other groups watched quietly, unsure whether to join in or stay silent. Speaker Harn stood, his long arms stretched out for peace. Captain Cole, control your team, he said firmly. Mira felt her throat tighten. She wanted to explain, to smooth things over like she always did. But her head felt like it was on fire. Everything inside her screamed to fight back. She took a step forward, trying to gather her thoughts. But then Alex, her security officer, pointed toward Vornak. He did this. He shut down our system. You're all watching us like animals, but you're letting him break the rules. Alex's voice shook with anger. He was right. Mira knew it, but saying it out loud only made things worse. The hall erupted into noise. Some delegates shouted for silence. Others argued over who was to blame. Fists slammed on tables. Voices clashed, growing louder and sharper. Mira could hardly breathe. This wasn't what she had trained for. This wasn't diplomacy. This was chaos. She closed her eyes and clenched her fists. She thought about Earth, about the families watching from home, about every human who had trusted her to protect their future. She could almost hear their voices, asking her what she was going to do now. For a moment, she felt small, weak, lost. But then, deep inside, she felt something else. Something she hadn't felt in years. Courage. Not the fake courage that came from a machine pressing down her fears. Real courage. The kind that came from being honest. From facing the truth, no matter how messy it was. She opened her eyes. She looked at her team, who were staring at her now, waiting for a command. Slowly, Mira stepped into the center of the hall. She raised both hands high. Enough, she shouted. Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. The hall grew quiet again. All eyes turned to her. Mira took a deep breath. She felt her emotions bubbling under the surface. But this time, she didn't push them down. She let them rise. She let them show on her face. She turned to Speaker Harn. We have lost control, she admitted, loud and clear. You can all see it. We are not hiding it. But hear me now. This is who we are. She turned slowly, facing every delegate, one group at a time. Yes, we have anger. Yes, we have fear. Yes, we are flawed. But that doesn't make us dangerous. That makes us real. Vornak crossed his arms, watching carefully. Mira pointed to her team. We built Courteous mode to help us fit into your ways. We wanted to show respect. We thought hiding our rough edges made us safer. But maybe that was our mistake. She lowered her hands. We are human. We feel. We struggle. We fight. But we also hope. We also care. And we still believe in peace. The hall was silent again. No one moved. Even Vornak's smile had faded. Myra's heart raced, but she stood tall. For the first time all day, she felt free. She had nothing left to hide. What happened next would not be up to her. For a long moment, no one spoke. The assembly hall was so quiet that Mira could hear her own breathing. Her chest rose and fell quickly, but she didn't look away. She had already said the truth. There was nothing left to fear. Senator Vornak was the first to break the silence. He leaned forward, placing his clawed hands on the table in front of him. His yellow eyes locked onto Mira. So, he said slowly, his voice sharp and cold, you admit it. You admit that without your precious Courteous mode, your people are raw, wild, uncontrolled. Mira didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She took one small step toward him, her voice steady. Yes, we're all those things. And more. Murmurs rippled through the hall again. Some delegates leaned in closer. Others whispered behind their hands. Mira could feel the tension building again, but she refused to stop. She had held back long enough. She turned toward the council, her voice growing stronger. You look at us now and see weakness. You see emotion. You see conflict. But you're wrong if you think that makes us dangerous. She glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of every species she could. You want to know who we really are? Look at us. This is who we are. We are not perfect. We argue. We make mistakes. But we learn. We grow. We reach out. We care about more than just ourselves. She took another step forward, raising her voice so no one could miss a word. Earth joined this union because we believed in something bigger than ourselves. We believed that all worlds, all species, can work together. Not because we were the same, but because we were different. We wanted to belong. And yes, we were afraid that if you saw our true nature, you would reject us. That's why we created Courteous mode. It wasn't to lie. It was to help us fit in, to make you feel safe around us. Her voice softened, but her words stayed clear. But maybe we were wrong to hide. Maybe real peace comes not from pretending, but from trusting each other to be honest. She let the words hang in the air. She could feel every heart in the room listening, waiting. Mira lowered her hands to her sides. She took one final deep breath. We are human. We have much to learn. But we are not your enemy. And we are not afraid to show you who we really are anymore. She stopped speaking. She stood tall and still, waiting for the council to respond. For several heartbeats, no one moved. Myra's team sat silently behind her. They looked nervous, but something had changed in their eyes. They no longer looked like they were trying to hold back. They looked free. Speaker Harn stood slowly, his long fingers pressed together in front of him. His three eyes studied Mira for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. "Thank you, Captain Cole," Speaker Harn said softly. "Your words have given us much to consider." Mira nodded slightly, not trusting herself to say more. Her throat felt tight again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was relief. Then, to Myra's surprise, a delegate from the Volari stood. The floating creature bowed its head slightly. "Let the record show," it said in a soft, echoing voice, "that the Volari recognize the honesty of Earth's words." Another delegate stood, this time from the Siltari, a race of crystal-skinned beings. "We, too, see no threat in truth," the Siltari leader added. One by one, more delegates stood. Some nodded. Some spoke. Some simply raised their hands in silent agreement. Mira felt her breath catch in her chest. She turned her head slightly to glance at Vornak. The Drashk senator sat frozen, his smile long gone. His sharp claws gripped the edge of his table, but he said nothing. For the first time, Mira saw something she never expected to see in his cold, yellow eyes: defeat. Speaker Harn raised his hand again. "Enough," he said. "We have heard what needed to be heard. We will vote, but I believe the council has already decided." He looked directly at Mira. "Earth will remain in the Union." A wave of quiet energy spread through the room. It was not loud. There were no cheers, but Mira could feel the shift. The walls of fear had cracked. The truth had been spoken, and the council had listened. Mira closed her eyes for a moment. She let out the breath she had been holding since the moment they arrived. She turned to her team. They were smiling, some with tears in their eyes. For the first time that day, they looked like themselves. She looked once more at Vornak. He turned his head away, saying nothing. Mira didn't need him to say anything. She had already won. She gathered her team, standing together as the council began to end the session. Earth's place in the Union was secure, and for the first time, it felt real. The assembly hall grew quieter as the official vote began. Speaker Harn, standing tall in the center, raised a glowing silver orb above his head. This was the signal that the council was about to cast their final decision. Mira stood motionless with her team, watching every step. Her hands were no longer shaking. Her breathing had settled, but her heart still felt heavy, knowing this was the moment everything had led to. "Members of the Galactic Council," Speaker Harn began in his deep, steady voice. "You have heard the charges. You have heard the defense. It is now time to decide. Will Earth remain a trusted member of this union, or will their place be revoked?" The hall stayed silent. The floating screens above the center of the chamber flickered to life. One by one, the names of each member species lit up. There were over 200 in total. Each name held a small icon next to it. Green for yes, red for no. Mira felt like time had slowed. The first icon turned green. Then another. Then 3 more. Green, green, green. Some turned red, but they were few. Most stayed green. Mira counted each one in her head, barely breathing. 50, 60, 90. A low sound filled the hall, the sound of members whispering as the votes climbed higher. Even her team started leaning in, watching the results. 120, 150. Mira knew they needed more than half to stay in the Union. The number kept climbing. 165, 172. Her hands clenched tightly at her sides. She stared at the screen, waiting for the final count. Then it happened. The last name turned green. Speaker Harn lowered the orb, his face showing no sign of surprise. He had likely known the outcome all along. But the Council still needed to hear it said aloud. Earth remains a full member of the Galactic Union, he declared. A wave of quiet sighs and nods filled the hall. There was no applause. The Union did not celebrate votes like this. But Mira knew what it meant. She had done it. Her team had done it. Earth was safe. Mira let her shoulders relax. She turned toward her team, offering a small but real smile. They nodded back, some looking like they wanted to shout for joy, but they held back. Even now, they showed respect for the Council's ways. But not everyone was pleased. Senator Vornak stood from his seat. His face was hard and unreadable. His yellow eyes locked onto Mira one last time. Without a word, he turned and left his place at the table. His long coat dragged behind him as he disappeared through the exit. Mira didn't feel like chasing him. He had tried to break them. He had failed. That was enough. Speaker Harn turned to Mira and gave a small nod. You have shown us much today, Captain Cole. Earth has faced its first real test here. You did not break. Mira bowed her head slightly. Thank you, Speaker. The council began to rise, the meeting officially over. Delegates slowly filed out of the hall. Some gave Mira small nods of respect as they passed. Others simply left in silence. But no one questioned Earth's place again. Mira turned to her team. Let's go home, she said softly. They followed her out of the chamber, walking down the long corridor toward their ship. The halls felt different now. Not as cold, not as heavy. Mira felt like she was walking taller. As they neared the docking platform, Alex leaned closer to her. Do we reactivate Courteous mode when we get home? Mira touched the small badge on her neck. She pulled it off gently and held it in her hand. The tiny silver device felt light, lighter than she had expected. She turned to Alex and shook her head. No, she said simply. We don't need it anymore. Her team nodded, some even smiling. They entered their ship and prepared for departure. As the engines hummed to life, Mira stood at the window one last time. She looked back at the massive silver dome floating in space. It still looked powerful. It still looked distant. But it no longer felt impossible. Earth had earned its place, and Mira knew this was just the beginning. The transport ship pulled away from the docking platform, leaving the grand assembly hall behind. The stars stretched endlessly across the dark sky. Mira Cole stood by the wide window again, just as she had when they arrived. But this time, the weight on her shoulders was gone. Her team worked quietly behind her, preparing for the long journey home. Their movements were calmer now. There were no more nervous whispers. No one checked their Courteous mode badges. No one needed to. Mira reached into her pocket and pulled out her own badge. She held it up in the dim light of the cabin. For years, this small device had been part of her life. It had helped her keep her emotions in check. It had helped her avoid mistakes. But today had proven something important. Mira pressed the small button on the side of the badge. A tiny red light blinked twice, then faded out completely. She placed the badge gently on the nearby table. She knew she would never wear it again. Alex approached quietly and stood beside her. Do you think we'll ever be fully trusted? He asked in a low voice. Mira thought for a moment. She kept her eyes on the stars outside. I don't know, she replied honestly. But I do know this. We'll never hide again. We'll show them who we really are. The good and the bad. That's how real trust starts. Alex nodded slowly, understanding. The ship's control panel beeped softly, signaling that they were ready for takeoff. Mira turned to face her team. They were all waiting for her word. Set course for Earth, she ordered with a small smile. Let's go home. The ship's engines hummed louder. The stars outside seemed to shift as the ship turned toward its path. As they moved deeper into space, Mira felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not the fake hope that comes from pretending. Real hope built on truth and courage. She knew Earth's future in the Union wouldn't be easy. There would be more challenges, more debates, more moments when others would doubt them. But now, they had proven something not just to the Council, but to themselves. They didn't need a machine to make them worthy. They only needed to be honest, to be real, to be human. And that was enough. Mira took one last look at the stars before walking back to her seat. Her team followed close behind, stronger and more united than ever. As the ship disappeared into the dark, endless sky, Mira smiled quietly to herself. The journey had only just begun.